Welcome to the Minors, where we focus on Habakkuk. This is week 12.4, the fourth week of Habakkuk of 6, where we are sitting down with Erik Marangi. Hi, Erik.
How you doing?
Good. So if people don't know, your wife is Christy Marangi. She's on staff here.
Absolutely.
And would you mind giving a little introduction of yourself?
I am Erik Marangi. I am Christy's husband.
I thought we just established that.
You did. I work for the Department of Corrections. I've been doing that for almost 28 years. So, yeah.
So if I ever get tossed in the hoosegow, at least I'll see a familiar face.
No, because I'll have to say...
He works from home. This is why...
Oh. Yeah, I do. I work from home. I can't believe I do, but about only once a month for a week I go to a prison and do some stuff, and then I come back home for 3 weeks. That's what I do for at least a year or so more, and then I'm done.
Nice.
What are you going to do when you're done?
Grow this out.
Yeah.
No.
Well, if Christy has anything to do with it, this will not be grown out, but I don't know yet.
Well, thanks for joining us. As we get going, Aaron, would you do the recap?
So today, what we're going to do is hit the entire response of God to Habakkuk's second complaint. And what God is going to do is point out to Habakkuk really what is at the center of every culture. And the center of every culture is our own idolatry. We think that the answers that we come up with as a people are going to be the answers that everyone needs. And when we do that, we focus so much on ourselves and not upon the gospel. And we see this happen today. We think that those people over there are the problem. And if we just got rid of those people, then everything would be okay. And instead, what God does is he steers Habakkuk back to the idea that there are two things that we need to focus on that will actually bring resolution to the world. And one of them is that the name of the Lord goes out to all of the earth. And the second thing is the understanding that God is in his temple, and that simply means that God has never been moved. God has never been shaken. He is who he is. And in the midst of our worries and struggles with the world, we come back to the understanding that the glory of God and his name and what he has done in the gospel goes out to the earth, and that God is sure and he has never been shaken. And that leads us to be a people who can speak hope in the midst of places where there really is no hope.
So it's called Justice for All, Justice to All. That's,
yeah.
That's what you call the sermon. So why
did I call it that?
Yeah.
God is the God of justice, and he will bring justice to everything. And as he points this out, he is going to use the evilness of one culture to discipline another, and in the end he'll use another culture to discipline that culture, and then he'll use another culture to discipline that culture, and it just moves on as the tide of God's justice rolls forward. And so justice in the end does come to all.
And Habakkuk's having this problem because he thinks that
justice is not coming to the people who are coming to bring justice to his people.
Right.
He's like, why?
Erik, did you have any takeaways after the message?
Yeah, I just love the idea that, we're always looking at like, well, what about them? What about them? We're concerned about the other guy, right? Like the other guy's always doing something wrong, but we do the same thing in our own ways to someone else, right? And in this case, it was the Babylonians or the Chaldeans or whatever that were going to end up disciplining the Israelites.
I think it's interesting because it comes down to something that you every once in a while mention to me. Apparently you mention it to your wife sometimes. You never want to talk about it, and I don't mean to bring this up to make your life miserable, but it's the whole thing of antinomy. Because you sit in this place and go like, well, if God's sovereign, what does it matter? Or if our choices, do this, then can we mess up God's plan? And you kind of struggle with that sometimes in your own mind. Yes, our choices count, and yes, God is sovereign, and everything we do, God's going to weave together. So does it count? Well, yes, it does, because our choices matter, and we're not puppets. And you kind of struggle with that sometimes.
Oh no, I absolutely do. And I try not to, but I get really caught up on the whole predestination or free will. And in the end, I 100% know that God is awesome and good, but it's like...
That's how you say it. Okay, but God's awesome.
Yes.
I may not get it, but God's awesome.
So every now and then I go, well, you need to choose God. Oh, wait a second. No, wait. God chooses you, I actually really like when I'm teaching the kids sometimes, I'm like... I have to be careful the way I say it, but in the end, it always comes back to God did everything, period. He did everything. and he made us part of this for some reason. For some reason he decided to make us part of this.
Yeah, why would he choose to use us with as messed up as we are? And yet he does.
Right.
All of our sinful decisions, he will and can work out for his glory and our good.
Totally.
But that doesn't mean our decisions don't matter and don't count.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know. And I mean, he gives us the ability, to mess up and to actually love him, not pretend love him. Yeah. Going back to your original question about takeaways from the sermon it was really neat to see that he decides to use the Chaldeans or Babylonians or Persians, who eventually.
The Persians come later, but the Chaldeans, Babylonians.
Right. But to essentially conquer them, right? Mm-hmm. But then Daniel, right? Mm-hmm. And all the cool stuff that comes out of that, right? Like why does God do things we don't always know?
And in Daniel, you see the changeover from the Babylonians to the Persians in the middle of Daniel being there. Yeah.
Yep. And then one of my favorite verses is when he's talking about Nebuchadnezzar and then Belshazzar, his son probably or whatever, but he's already been through all this with Nebuchadnezzar, and then he's like, well, your father kind of went through this the hard way and eventually learned and was in the dew with the cows and the cattle. But apparently you're
not going to learn.
Yeah, but you're probably not gonna, but he did, and eventually, but it's a lot like us, right?
So how about for you guys, is there a people group that you often will point at and say, look at them, God, like why aren't you fixing them, and as opposed to internal?
Yes.
And
anything I say is just going to get me in trouble from here on out.
Like when I think about like the work thing, right? Like, I've always considered like these people over here are bad, very, very bad people, right? I mean, some worse than others, but it's always been a good reminder too to just go, no, I mean, we are all broken. Some of us might contribute to society in a good way more than others, but as far as God's concerned, like we're all just broken people.
See, I feel like I do a better job of that when I'm on stage or a talking element or something like that. I feel like I do a much better job speaking and thinking that way. But if I'm with some friends or alone and I see some news report or something like that, I am much more apt to drop down into oh my goodness, if those people were just gone. I find myself falling into the trap that I feel when I'm doing this or speaking from the front, it's the idea that I have to have a priest role for people, so I have to steer people to the gospel. So I do my best to do that in a way that's stop looking at us and all these things, look at what God is actually doing, and to steer that way. But if I'm alone, it's much easier to fall into the trap. Or just hanging out with some people, and it's like, did you see this news report? Oh my, what? The news report? What?
Yeah.
I mean, right now, the biggest thing we got is Afghanistan. And 5 weeks ago, what does Biden say? He says, you'll never see helicopters having to rescue people from any place in Afghanistan because, we wouldn't let that happen. And then what happens?
Right.
We've got these people that for the last 20 years we have said you can trust us. And now those people can't trust us because now we're not taking care of them. You have people clamped into the wheel wells of airplanes as we're trying to get out of there, and we literally have video of people falling from these planes as they're trying to be safe because we have abandoned them.
Yeah, it's like having an informant give you some information
and then
saying, hey, that's the guy that did it. You know what I mean? That's scary, man.
And the interesting thing about this whole thing, though, is that it seems like for the first time, people on both sides, liberals and conservatives, agree. New York Times, Washington Post, they have news reports both coming out and saying this is a fiasco.
So God says the 2 points in the message was make the Lord's name known in all the earth, and God is in his temple. He's not shaken. So how can we, as God's people in Santa Maria, try to accomplish those two things?
That's a good question.
You want me to go first?
Yeah.
I think there's a couple ways to do that. I think we have to think missionally and biblically, gospel-centeredly. That's not a word, but I'll make it a word. Because in doing so, those things will come to the forefront of our mind. It's fun sometimes to sit there and just rail and complain about all the stuff that's going on, but if we're never steering each other back to the gospel and God being in his holy temple, and the name of the Lord needs to be the one that goes forth to fix the problems, well, the problems are never going to get fixed.
Yeah, and it, like for me too, like many times I'll miss an opportunity that's right there, right? Like, you could be that light in these disgusting situations that happen, but oftentimes we're just right there in it, like, oh yeah, this is stupid. It reminds me, on a couple Sundays ago, we're going through Revelations in children's, and they're talking about the lampstands. It said read Revelations 1 or 2 and have the kids draw what they're seeing. And it was so cool, man. It ended up being like, I almost scratched it, but I ended up doing it. And, we have that big grease board in there and another one. So I just gave them a little thing, and they're all drawing this stuff. And that was one of the things, was the lampstand. And so I just kind of talked about what it meant. And it's like, so is there darkness right now, It was just cool to have them realize that, well, hey, wait, we're supposed to be like that hope, as the church. And it was just kind of neat to see them draw the different things and be able to explain like how that applies right now.
It's interesting you said this is one of the few times left and right are agreeing about something, going back to what's happening in the Middle East.
Not all of them are agreeing, but there's a good portion that are.
Well, and I think this is a good opportunity for Christians to step in and to acknowledge where we agree, and whatever side you're on, and then not just say point fingers, but point to Christ. And I think if we did that more, if we try to find what we agreed with whoever the other side is, the Babylonians of our life, and get to a point where we agree, I wonder how much more we can speak truth into, because we're not just attacking what we disagree with, but we're agreeing, and then we're trying to move the ball forward. And it's not your side's wrong, but it's look at Christ, look at who God is.
If we're not getting people to understand the gospel, all of our ideas and all the causes we run behind are ultimately going to just push people further apart. Because in thinking this way, it's like, well, all those people who think the other way are bad, and they're the terrible ones, rather than we're all messed up and we're all the terrible ones, and that Jesus rescues us. And if we cannot see the evil that runs down the center of every human heart, we're not going to understand that we all need the gospel. And that's what kind of pulls me out of so many of these books that are written like this. It's like, well, here's the thing, and I'm not saying what they're saying is wrong. What I'm saying is, if that just becomes our issue and our cause, we are missing the gospel, and we're going to push people further and further apart.
I mean, I think that's all the minors, right? All the prophets. The answer is not within us. It is, or our societies, but it is against.
You are prideful. You are arrogant. Yeah, and it comes back to the gospel. Is our focus the gospel, or is the focus our irritation? And if the focus is the gospel, if the focus of the gospel, we become humble, we become thankful, we become missional minded, we become service oriented. Not because of those things, but because the gospel naturally breeds that in us. And so our focus must always be the gospel.
So this week, we hope that you be less prideful. And the only way to do that is to focus on the work and person of Jesus Christ, to find ways to engage others missionally minded, to remind them or tell them that Jesus is Lord, and that he is over all, and that he is in his temple. He's not shaken. Nothing is outside of his control. Nothing surprises him.
And one of the ways we show that is by the hope that we have in the midst of everything looking like it's melting down, that we can have hope because God is secure. Yeah. So I didn't mean to steal your thing.
No, but so how do people get that hope? What's I mean, what is it that brings that internal
trust? Your faith, which means trust, trusting who God says he is. And we think God's in his holy temple, and that too often people hear that and they think, oh, God's in heaven, he's up here, he's not about you. But it's a metaphorical idea that God is not shaken. God is not moved from his seat. God is not moved from his power. He has always been, and nothing we do could ever shake that. And that is supposed to make us feel secure in who God is.
So spend time focusing on God, who he is. And if you don't know, genuinely, there are tools to help. You can come talk to us. We can help show you what God says about himself, how he's revealed him about himself. And so hopefully you can begin to learn to put your faith, your trust in him, in who he says he is, and that changes everything, period. End of sentence. We'll see you next week. So this is nice. So this is the work from home.
This is the I only have to shave once a month. So
Nice.
You're gonna look like a prophet.
I do. It's still pretty weak, but maybe when I'm like 50 or 55, I'll be able to fill in this part.